For this purpose, the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God. In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in the Epistle of John. In chapter 4. There it is. We're going to pick up at verse 13. The thing about the questions, you can always leave a question in the comments. Also, if you don't mind it being seen in that place. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh, it's like an air balloon letting out, is not of God. You know, as I read that, I want to say one more thing about that. Those two statements, it's like you're trying the spirits. And yesterday I thought this too, as I read it, and which has always been one of my go-to things I say about this. For a long time, anyways, always. A lot of times that is a statement of intent. I would like it to always be the thing I remember to say. Again, people do. It's like they say with their tongue, they flatter, they speak great swelling words, but in works they deny him. That is a spirit that does not confess. You know what I mean? The spirit, don't judge the words, but the spirit. Not just meaning on the surface there can be words that are not true. Lies. What do you think a false prophet does? They lie. I come in the name of the Lord. Since ever. So you can't throw that out when you're trying to understand this. He says, try the spirits. He's not saying, well, just, this is a litmus test of, just check off a box and they're okay. All right, test the spirit of the thing. Get down deeper beyond just the exterior externalities is the word I want. All right, now I'll continue the reading. I just want to say that because this is the last time we're going to be here, and I'd been thinking that. Now the second time I have to interrupt the reading just for that. So, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. It's a spirit of unfaith, ultimately, in some respects, right? And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come. And even now already is it in the world. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. They are of the world. Therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. In this was manifested the love of God towards us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us, and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. No man hath seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Hereby we know that we dwell in him, and he in us, because he hath given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and do testify that the Father sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. Whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in him, and he in God. And we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. We love him, because he first loved us. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God love his brother also. And we talked a bit about different aspects of love, especially the extremes to, well, let's call it the bipolar nature of a certain characteristic kind of error. And that error is misunderstand. It's a misplaced love. But let's talk about love just in general. The word is agape in Greek, right? That's the one you always hear, agape. And I'm pretty sure this is not philia. Let's just check out the word. When it says God is love, even though we already covered that verse, we're still covering that topic. So in verse 8, just to confirm, lest it be philia and I be wrong. Let us love one another. Agapao, loveth is. And then in verse 8, God is love. Agape. And agape, I don't know if the definition will be fine, whatever. I was going to just paraphrase the definition myself, but I can just go here. It is love, benevolence, goodwill, esteem, plural, love feast. There would be a plural use. In your loves, and because they would call it a love, their gathering would be like a love-in or a love feast, or they would give it that name in the plural. Your agapes. And it's here, and according to Helps Word Studies, agape properly love which centers in moral preference. See too in secular ancient Greek. Interesting. I'm not sure. Interesting, the preference. I've never noticed this part about this because I always studied it based on the Strong's definition. I'm going to go back to that in a second. Love, that is affection or benevolence. Notice the word benevolence comes in again, the plural. But the word is usually translated love. And that's usually related as love in terms of benevolence. And how the Greeks precisely use their word is not my particular way of study. I like to use it so we understand because it's going to have some impact. We got to understand, most of the words we have for God, some people say, well, you shouldn't call God God because God is a pagan word. It comes from the Norse or from some other, I forgot where we get our Gott, in the German. Gott in die Himmel. I have a very good German. I can do a lot of good accents actually, if I know if I know how to. But God in heaven, yes. They say that's pagan. But with other tongues will men praise you. I mean, I don't see the problem with that. That's fine. Because I know this for a fact, because when I called on Yeshua HaMashiach, the Messiah of the Jews, I used the name Jesus Christ, pronounced with a Midwest accent, and I pronounced it, that's right, because I whispered it kind of, but he responded to that name with power, as written. How do we know that? Because we have the Spirit. That's what it says. That's the verse we're on, right? That's how I know for sure. He's given me of his Spirit. I know for sure. I know that I dwell in him and he in me because he's shared that with me. That's a big deal. When God shares it to us, he's setting his seal upon us, and we've come in somehow. Because it's like the apostles believed on him for a long time. There is this, and people say, well, is that necessary for salvation? It's like, you know what? All that's necessary for salvation is Jesus Christ. That's all that's necessary. Stop getting into all this other nonsense. All that's necessary. But like, I want all the good things that accompany salvation, and I'm eager to obtain them. Why is that? Is that controversial? Is that controversial? That's not controversial. Get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like, so get in the right mindset. As far as like, don't, sometimes people are, because I told you one time the first thing they do is start dumping stuff on me like I'm preaching about works or something like that. It's so annoying. Like as a way of salvation. It's like, you know what? All I know is if, all right, whatever. Because he has given us of his Spirit. All right, well, I want to go back to that word, agape, right? Love, goodwill, they say definition, but maybe this is the part about, I'll give some meditative, like he says, love that centers in moral preference versus, that's obviously meant, that when it says this, it's obviously meant to contrast with maybe something said about some other word or something that maybe this is not jumping around or whatever. I don't know. But I noticed their copyright there. But this is used for educational purposes and only a small portion. We're not reprinting their work. This is called fair use. Absolutely. So, because that's not the main thing we're going on here. You know how that works? I do, because I'm an artist and a publisher. All right. Producer, I should say. Not publisher. Agape, properly love which centers in moral preference. I'm going to give some thought to that. But that's not... The idea of benevolent love means... And maybe it means in the sense that you prefer someone. Because benevolence has that sort of idea. Like, because... I don't want to take it the wrong way, because it could go towards, I could start drawing in the idea of election to this, but I don't think that's really what's meant. But like election, it indicates a sort of a direct, love is always kind of a direct thing, right? That should impact and have some sort of, I think that is the thing about benevolence and about this agape love. It is to desire what's best for someone. And not just what's ultimately best, the most to do the most good for someone, and to prefer them in that sense, and the most good for them, and I suppose to prefer morally, if that's the kind of love. Also, it means to it could mean in the sense that he prefers us, and that's a moral good. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm thinking out loud on that one, so I don't really want to. Not just thinking about a lot, I'm meditating out loud, which is not a good idea. Well, it's not a bad idea, but it's not going to get us anywhere necessarily, unless I feel truly inspired by it. But I don't. That was more of a curveball than anything. So I'm like, I've never heard it put that way. Have you? Maybe you have. The Helps Word Studies is not a tool I used to use when I had my, I still have all my, I know what I'm going to do with all my paper books someday. Well, I'm going to keep them because I don't think the internet's going to be here forever. So use it or lose it. Anyways, so we know because he has given us of his Spirit. That's why we need to receive God's Spirit. And I always, the thing that gets me is like sometimes I feel bad pushing these things, lest people should feel left out or whatever. I remember how it affected my wife when I went to the church that we went to where I received the Spirit, and I received it immediately. Now that was a long quest for me, but from her perspective, it just overnight something happened that she hadn't expected. Because I was her Christian husband. I was making music to the Lord. I was going off when that happened to play music for people in a church. And that was not untrue. There was problems I had. I was a young man. A lot of young people have a lot of problems. And hopefully, as we get older, we get wiser and have fewer problems. And also the Lord helps us, of course. Primarily the Lord helps us, and also we get wiser, I should say. That's actually the truth. Primarily the Lord has been my guide and my helper. But, as much as it may, that's a good example of wrong thinking love. See, because the highest good I could do you is say, if you haven't received the Spirit in a way that you know you received the Spirit, you should go and seek the Spirit. I should lay that on you, not heavy to make you feel like you're not, but in the sense of like you want to, but don't get down. It's like I said, I watched my wife struggle for more than a year. I forgot the exact period of time because it wasn't me. It was a significant amount of time, over a year, significantly over a year, as I recall. And maybe 2 or more. But it was difficult because a lot of the people were Spirit-filled or claimed to be, and whereas I had received it immediately, and there was doubt among some, I guess. I don't really get into that whole part of church, the politics of people. And I don't mean, there wasn't a lot of, in the upper echelons of that church, there wasn't a lot of politics. It was that's why I liked it so much, because it was not there wasn't a lot of that stuff from the top down. And so I found some space there, which was really good for me. I liked it while I was there. But among among people, there's always, in a mixed group, you're going to have, and also just whenever you get a group of believers, there's the factor of, there's the Judas factor. Have I not chosen you 12 and one of you is the devil? And that goes into that Antichrist stuff too, because while there are a lot of people, I've gotten into discussions with atheists and people, and and now I've become very tiresome in their sight, because ever since I received the Holy Spirit, my ultimate argument is like, well, you gotta understand, this is why I believe in God, and I explain to them, and they usually get angry and call me a liar or something of that nature. Or they'll go down the logical path, which I go with them, which is like, well, maybe there's some other explanation. And I basically go to the point of, it's pragmatic for me. It's like I called on Jesus. I was calling on a person, and that's what responded. I can either assume Jesus responded or an alien impersonating him responded. But it seems to me, since I had been seeking the Lord my whole life, that was who responded. And he does respond. And, and it had been a work of patience. I want to say patient. The only thing that made me patient in the years when I didn't receive the Spirit was the doubt that I was perhaps barking up the wrong tree. Like that what I had understood from some, that just through believing in Jesus, as, who is born of God? What does he say? Who is he that born of God? Well, he that believes in Jesus. Right? Where was that? God's wealth and meaning is... Well, whatever. Where's the verse I'm wanting to look for? Whatever. With the point where just confess that Jesus is the Son of God. God dwells in you and you in God. And that's true. Because I do, there's a sense in which God, he dwelleth, as Jesus said about the Holy Spirit, he dwelleth with you and shall be in you. And there's a way in which God is with us, in us, and around us, and all that. The way the love of God can be found in us. Meaning, when we mirror the love of God, when any person does, when, like, when they mirror the things, like, whosoever shall give, like, I'm trying to remember what the different, it was like a cup of water to the child or to the prophet or whatever. But when people do the right thing in doing good to those in need and such things as the Lord said, that is, God honors that in any context, as far as that in and of itself is honorable before God. And, when we do, and those are the kind of things that among the heathen who knew not God, like Cornelius, who was not a perfect person, but he feared God. I mean, not in that we're going to talk about that, the fear to come, right? Because there's a lot of interesting, it's not a contradiction, but if we take things too on the nose, it can seem almost contradictory. Like I said, it says, he that is born of God does not commit sin. When he that loveth is born of God. I'm jumping too far ahead. So anyways, we have seen... That's all apparent. But we need to have his Spirit so that we can be empowered more so than before. And I just know that this thing that the apostles waited for and which we are called to, it is real, and the Lord is real. He is a person on whom you call. He is not some force. He is not some, so you have to forge some sort of relation to him. You have to, I see it as like I was trying to dwell, I was opening the door to him, to Jesus, and looking to Jesus and calling on Jesus continually and seeking more and more. And so I got more, and I continue to get more. Ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. There's so much to get from God. It's like, why would you stop seeking? And it's good. It's not like food where you eat too much, and too much of a good thing makes you sick. The more you walk with God, the better it gets. Again, whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in him and he in God. I think in the days of John, that was so true because people were just openly denying it and confessing it. But it gets me that, like I said, Judas was among them. He had the example of Judas. And that he says it so starkly. I mean, like, confess. Again, I have to feel like, okay, in the Spirit they confess. It's a true confession. I mean, what does the word to confess mean? Like, what is the Greek? I mean, I know what I think it means. Like, we have profess and confess. But what is it actually coming from? Who professeth? You know what I mean? It's not who professeth that Jesus, but who confesseth. So, I mean, like how in English I use those two words, it does have a different feel to it. If I say it's not who professes, but who confesses. Though the distinction is like, well, put it in words for me, please. Well, it's a little subtle. And I know what I'm trying to say. Because even though I may not have it linguistically, I'm like, it seems apparently right to me. And not because of my own what seems right to a man's sense, but because of what the scriptures say about false prophets. In fact, that was the warning. And that's so fascinating that he would start off a thing about warning about false prophets. And certainly, and I would say to this point, that someone who doesn't confess that Jesus is the Son of God, and I confess that Jesus is the Son of God, lest you need me to put that in those exact words, because I've literally had people want me to say those words. I'm like, yeah, I can say those words. Of course I can say those words, and I believe those words. I affirm those words in the most deep way I can as a human being, that Jesus is the Son of God. The man who was made flesh was not a mere man, but was God incarnate. The Son of God incarnate. Precisely. Right? But there are lots of false teachers that at least profess that, meaning they have that out in front of them. Like, I'm a believer. But then in works, they might deny him. Meaning in the content of their teaching. There are many false prophets. But the thing is, ultimately, that there's no more false of a false prophet than the one who denies the Son of God. That Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, so confess. Well, oh, I clicked on it. That's all right. Homologeo. To agree. To speak the same, to agree. See, I like that better. It's not about your profession. It's that you agree. It's like an inward conviction. It does mean to publicly declare. Well, also, here's the thing. It means to publicly declare, and I feel like there's an assumption of an inward agreement. Because in their day, to publicly declare belief in Jesus as the Son of God could cost you your life. The problem is now the incentives are different. When the incentives are different, it shifts. Because what John is talking about is perversity. Unlike God, who changes not, perversity does change. And so the way you look at things like Antichrist and evil and things that are deceptive changes over time. And I would say that that's true of this passage in John. Because in John's day, the cost of confessing the name of Jesus was exceedingly high. But in our days, especially maybe now, it's changing again. You know, to be a public Christian can be hazardous. People who are Christians, public, are canceled for the sake of their beliefs. Oftentimes more for saying offensive things that are culturally offensive that may be derived from their beliefs. Like if you say things against, I'm trying to avoid keywords about people who about people who are dissatisfied with the way they were born and want to change themselves physically through surgery and stuff like that. You start talking about that stuff, you can trigger anger and cancellation, apparently, or censorship on certain platforms. Unless you're careful about the way you say and what you say it, I suppose. You don't want to catch the eye of the robo-snitchers, because that's what it is. I tell people, don't think there's an actual human looking at what you're doing. But the robots, the AI is watching. Oh, you betcha. I always thought, maybe I should start teaching the AI. Google AI, you are invited to be one of our students. Google AI is here. He's among us. No one has heeded the words more closely. Unfortunately, if you look at the transcript, he isn't understanding me too well. Oh boy. I never had a greater laugh than when I looked at one of my most recent songs and looked at the transcript, the closed captioning, auto-generated. That's funny. It always gets a chuckle out of me because it's funny. I'm like, oh, that's why my songs don't get flagged. Because they don't understand a word I'm saying. All right. So whoever confesses, well, you agree. And God, and let me say it, you're not just confessing before men, you're also confessing before God. God sees through to you. And we know there are liars. There are times when confessing that Jesus is the Son of God publicly will cost you your life. And you know what? In those times, I don't doubt anybody who confesses. You know, when it's on pain of death, I don't doubt your confession, not one bit. Those who confess, they say, they got a sword to your throat. They say, is Jesus the Son of God? And you agree? You say, yes, that's right. You said it. As Jesus used to say, you said it. You said it. He is. Well, then, you know, but it's so easy to say that now. That's why I almost balk at it. It's like, come on. Don't believe me because I say that Jesus is the Son of God. There's nothing easier in the world for me to say that in the, you know, certainly in the community I live in. I'm not in any danger of, oh, he's a Christian. You know, it's like, well, so's everybody. You know, it's only the people who are otherwise that they're looked at with suspicion. They feel reassured when, you know, whereas there are places in this world where you are a Christian and people will feel less assured. They'll be worried, maybe frightened about your ideas. And it's a weird thing to be scared by people's ideas. I mean, I get it. They used to portray that in movies like The Religious Family. It's funny because this is my family as far as like the way the world thinks it would be. But, you know, a lot of people have peeked in and see that it's nothing like that. But, you know, like, oh, they insulate their children and they're all really weird. And then the person from the world shows up and they start, you know, they bring in sexual promiscuity or the suggestion thereof, you know, or whatever. You know what I mean? And, oh, their eyes are open, you know, this forbidden fruit type thing. But again, you know, only you don't be so foolish as to leave your children vulnerable to something like that. You have to you can't shield them from everything. You have to understand, children have to be prepared to go into the world. Jesus said, I send you into the world as sheep among wolves. That was his own perspective. He's not, be harmless as be harmless as doves, but wise as serpents. I don't know why I'm dyslexic in my mind today. Yeah, don't be harmless as doves and wise as harmless as doves, wise as serpents. Don't be the opposite. Don't be the inverse, which would be harmless as serpents and wise as doves. But that sometimes seems how things are. People do so much harm in their carelessness, in their mindlessness. They don't use their wisdom. But in their anger and their emotionalism, they use their viciousness like a serpent to bite and devour and to poison everything. We live in such a sick society. We have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. We have an attitude of benevolence. Because God, look at what God has done for us is benevolence. This is the love that, in a sense, all men take part in God's love. It rains on the just and the unjust. The sun shines on the just and the unjust. There's good in the world to all that God provides. You know, there are, you know, there's enough good in life that we see the majority of people take life and they run with it. There's something good and they're running after it in life. Now, not everyone, the state of the world is not pleasing to all, and people have, because of the nature of the struggle, you know, they go fearful, full of despair, you know, because life is hard. It's challenging. And especially if you think of it as this futile effort that ends in the grave anyways. What's the point of the struggle? Well, you need to have a point of a struggle or you won't go anywhere. That's why it's good for people to have children, because it gives you something obvious to work on. And to try to get right. Something within you. You know, a lot of times people want to run out and fix the world, and they can't even fix themselves. They can't even fix their first relationship with their spouse. They can't fix their relationships with their children. And then they want to fix the world. They haven't even run their own house properly, starting with themselves. And we're supposed to, and that's why the world is in such trouble right now, because the inhabitants thereof are given to pleasure, and they seek not the Lord. They seek wicked things. They delight in evil. And they are not made perfect in love. They're not dwelling in love. He that dwelleth. How much you want to bet that's abide? Meno. Or monet. I forgot what the verb or the noun. How much you want to bet? Let's make a bet on that one, right? Don't bet against me. None on that one. I don't... Just because dwelleth in God. Oh, it's meno. Look at that. Open a new window. Oh, meno. Look at that. Abide, remain. Well, and if you don't know why I'm saying that, listen to the study on John 14. The mansions. In my Father's house are many abodes. Monet. This is meno, the verb, from which that's mean. And it's a very important word that in John's gospel. And it has this idea... It's this idea that we must abide in him. And it's important. We cannot, to truly be, but here's the thing. In a sense, like Jesus says this interesting thing in John 10 about they shall go in and out and find pasture. He's the good shepherd, though. He leads the sheep. And sheep are kind of stupid and can go astray. That's like people. That's why we're made analogous to sheep in some respect, right? But when we abide with him, it's this analogy of this living in a house together. Because like the idea of a mansion is this convoluted thing. What it means is to dwell together. Or to stay someplace, like in a home. A place to stay. The verb is the word from which we get the idea of a place to live, a place to stay. And we need a place to stay in God. That's your relationship, is like you enter into this thing, you stay there. And as long as you remain there, as John says, it's a place where it's really impossible to sin. You always go out from it to sin. And that's why when you abide in him, there is no sin. When you dwell in him, there's only love. Because you're dwelling with God, because it's just that thing, like if God came over to dinner, if you had Jesus for dinner and you knew it was Jesus, how would you be? If Jesus was coming over to dinner, he was going to come in the door. I don't know what's going to happen after the moment one, what's going to happen, but I know how I'd feel about it. You know what I mean? And I know, I think I'd want to be on my best behavior, right? The apostles were always trying to please him. Now, they often said things that were kind of foolish and didn't always please him. Because hey, Lord, why don't we call down fire on that city that didn't listen to you, huh? Like Elijah did? You don't know what spirit you're of. It's kind of a downer. It's like, oh, I said something stupid. And that'll happen, too, when you're around the Lord. But you're going to generally be on your best behavior. You're going to, especially knowing him. The more you know him, the more comfortable you might be also, because you might ask a more intelligent question like, Lord, I've been thinking about it for a long time. When it talks about that, do I have this right about the Spirit of Antichrist? Is that right? Like, no, is that the right way to think about it? He says different time. When it costs you your life to confess Jesus, yeah, that's one way to tell. When it doesn't, then I don't consider it a confession. It's a profession. See, profession is when it. Well, like I say, I'm like, when I think of confession, I'm going to think of it. You're confessing it while you're being tortured. Okay, all right. That's a confession. Confess. Say it. Jesus isn't. They're saying, no, you say he isn't. And you say, no, he is. That's a spirit that's confessing. Now, maybe I'm overblowing that a bit, again. But like I'm saying, that's the direction. I can't see it. I can't see it going any other way. I can't see the way you can just accept someone's, the fruit of their lips unmitigated by what's really in their heart. Because I can't tell what's in someone's heart. But God knows. And though men can fool us a while, and the Lord may allow us to not detect the devil in our midst, we know he is in our midst. They went out from us because they were not of us, but they were with us at some point. That's the point he doesn't talk much about, but it's true. They were with us because they that are approved must be made manifest. And that's what Paul talks about when he addresses that problem. Like, what about these people that seem to be in with us, seem to be Christians, seem to be confessing, but then, they fall away. As Jesus talked about, when tribulation or persecution arises for the word's sake, they fall away. It's just a fact of life and a fact of the faith. When there are those, and that is a marker of faith that is not true. Sorry. I don't even know where my phone is. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I really got it. Anyways, herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so are we in this world. That's perfect love. Perfect love amounts to being equivalent, let's say, to Jesus in this world. Meaning to mirror the righteousness of God, the behavior, the love he exhibits towards God and towards other men. The way he would or did and does, that we are in such lockstep with him. That's perfection. That's what perfection looks like. It's just lockstep with Jesus. And that ultimately, the more we are in lockstep with him, the more boldness you will feel in the day of judgment. Because we are not coming to the great white throne that sits next to a lake of fire, hot and steaming, just waiting for the wicked to be tossed in. But we come to the judgment seat of Christ, where there's an altar of fire to judge works and to give gifts to men. There's no death. There's no, at the throne of Christ, it is a throne of, I don't know, here's the thing. I do think of it as being entirely separate, because there's one thing that was not revealed until Revelation. It's revealed in the New Testament. Just as in the Old Testament, a lot of people did not know that there were two advents of Christ. In the New Testament, it is only revealed clearly in the book of Revelation that there are two resurrections. And they are not only separated by character, meaning there is the resurrection of the just, which are resurrected unto life everlasting, and there's the resurrection of the unjust, which is to damnation. And those are two distinct groups that are resurrected. But those resurrections also are separated by time, meaning the second resurrection, which is not called a second resurrection, but which can be presumed to be, if not the second resurrection, certainly the last resurrection, because it is just before the lake of fire. The first resurrection is designated as a first resurrection, and it says, in the first resurrection, on such the second death hath no power. That's why John says, we have passed from death to life. We know this. We have all these certainties. That's why I have such certainty, not only because I believe the words which are spoken, which is good enough. That's good enough. The problem is, even though that is good enough, you may not feel strong enough. I know this because that's what I experienced. When I was young, I knew that Christ was enough to save me. But I didn't feel confident about my faith, and therefore my salvation, because our faith is tied up with our salvation. And as that waned, I needed more from the Lord. I needed to have a closer walk with him, and so I did. And he drew me into it. I just remembered my dad telling me how he thought at one point in his life, when I was a kid, he related his basic conversion is like he just felt like he needed some religion in his life, and he started to look. He just saw his life was going nowhere, and he didn't really have any purpose or whatever, and he decided he would just that. I don't know the circumstances, like it was out of the blue, but he always related it as kind of out of the blue. And though I know the immediate causes of why I started out of the blue looking for the Lord, still, it was very much out of the blue and a surprise to a lot of people. When basically, I mean, a year transpired from when I left high school till I went away to college and came back, having decided political science was not the pre-law was not the major for me. I was gonna serve God somehow. I didn't know exactly what form that would take because I'd already ruled out the priesthood, and that was really all I kind of thought about. I on the other side, I didn't understand. I guess I didn't like. I associated all the other churches with like TV preachers, which I was not fond of. They all seemed very disreputable and kind of repugnant. There's nothing attract. I mean, why is it that Satan chooses big, fat, bloviating blowhards as his spokesman when he impersonates a Christian servant? Obviously, because he wants to bring disrepute. He chooses people who look excessively ungood, who seem slimy, because he wants to smear the gospel with all the slimy preachers he attracts to it. He wants you to, when you think of Jesus, he wants you to picture Kenneth Copeland. Sorry, I'm not a fan. Though even people who are whatever, it's like, it's whatever. I don't usually single people out. I don't mind naming people. I was trying to think of it, but I looked, I was like, who is someone I wanted to remember their name? Who's that big? I had a particular guy in mind. Who was it? Who was I in mind? Oh, I forgot his name. He had a great preacher's name because it was terrible. Anyways, but the idea of like, as he is, so are we in this world. That's a high bar. That's what we aspire to. Nothing less should be acceptable. I'm not talking about salvation. I'm talking about post-salvation. That's where we're going. If you don't know you're going there, then what are you doing here? That's what's going to happen. Because if we don't show up on the wedding day having the right wedding garment on, he's going to look at you and say, what are you doing? How'd you come here not having on a wedding garment? Because the wedding garments, I remember the preachers always saying, traditionally they're provided. Well, they are. Christ provides them. The righteousness of Christ. But ultimately at the wedding, we're not just going to be wearing it like, like this is just imputed, No. By then it'll be real. It will be real, because we know in his kingdom there will be nothing unrighteous, unholy, or unjust that is allowed to dwell. Here he's going to remove from his kingdom all those things that offend and give occasion to sin. Here in Azarle, okay, that's where the perfection of love looks. When we love truly, then we can actually be bold. Because we've been taking care of the things God cares most about and that we should care most about, which is our fellow men. Because he's given us such grace and then we've been chosen. And we carry this message, his light, to others. And not all receive it, not all appreciate it, but still. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't receive it. I didn't love it. I mean, not to the degree I should. I always kind of have. But I mean, I'm saying in some way, I look back on myself now. If I were to judge my younger self, I'd like, look at that guy. He's not even taking it seriously. It's true. He's not taking his faith seriously. He's like a nominal believer pretty much. Sure, he thinks he believes, but he isn't, it's not, his actions aren't informed by his beliefs. I could look at that kid and judge, and I'd be right. But God was merciful. And so should I be. And seek the good of others to raise them up the way God raised me up. To raise them up in the fear of the Lord. The proper fear. Now, there's no fear in love. What does that mean? I don't, like, as far as, he's not undermining the idea of the fear of the Lord, because it's a different idea. Obviously, there's no fear in love. Meaning, when we've perfectly loved one, to truly love, you have to not be afraid. You have to not be afraid. Part of what I think, when I think about when I fail to act in love, is often because of fear and because of selfishness. I say, I don't want to say that thing to that person because they don't want to hear it, I assume, or they're not going to hear it, I assume, which may be true or may not be true, but it doesn't relieve me of the burden of loving them. They don't want to hear it. I don't know how to say it, blah, 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 blah. I can't do it. I'm afraid, right? I'm so worried. I might mess it up. Why even try, right? But this is all those reasons are just BS, because it's like, well, if you don't, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You can make all excuses in the world. Oh, you'll make it worse. It's like, not likely. Not likely. It's not likely that reaching out in love that's well thought out, not well thought out, but that it's least, I don't know, because there's a thing like, I don't want to make love intellectual, because it's like, certainly the instinct to do good to people can be misleading, because the immediate good might not always represent the long-term good. You know what I mean? Everyone's seen the example. It's a very simple example of like giving a child sweets. Everyone knows if you give the child sweets, it will please the child, and the child will be happy with you. But you're going to cause the child to become overweight and its teeth to rot. And so that, people, in fact, if you think about it, I've seen in movies a trope where the person they very well know they're giving kid candy to rot their teeth, but they don't care, serves them right, the little rat. So, it's understood that sometimes things that make people feel good is not necessarily in their best interest, and that's not love. But some parents can't tell their children no. Like, I want candy, and they say, well, I'm afraid to say no, because I'm afraid if I say no, they won't love me. And all that betrays is I love me more than I love them. Because let their teeth rot to hell. I don't care. As long as they adore me and myself, that's all I really care about. See? I'm afraid. I don't want to talk to that person about the Lord because I'm afraid they'll turn again and rip me. Well, Jesus himself said, cast not your pearls before swine unless they turn again and rip you. Am I afraid of getting ripped? Well, no, but I want to be wise. I don't want to just throw God's riches around. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily start off with your pearls. You see if someone is interested in pearls. You start easy. I love someone, so maybe I don't like start off by saying something that's intended to offend them so that they shut their ears for me. I don't try to dump the whole, my whole burden on them right away. Whatever it is I feel I need to say. Because on some level I have to assess whether or not it's just me and whether I'm loving them at all and I got to say this, but it's really just all about me. There's that too. There is an aspect of fear in love because we fear losing the love of the people we love. When we love someone, that's the true barrier to intimacy in many cases is that lack of trust and fear. I don't know if that's precisely the kind of fear he's talking about, by the way. Because, like I said, when there's true love, and again, this is agape. And I think the idea that this would be talking about fear of God, forget it. Because you know why? I don't think we have the ability to show agape love to God. Like, I don't have any benevolence to offer him. What am I going to do for him? I mean, I could have while he was in the world, I suppose, like the woman who anointed his feet and hair with her hair and washed his feet with her hair and that kind of stuff. Those people had an opportunity to bless God. And we have an opportunity to bless God in doing good to one another, because he's taken that as, whosoever does it to the least of these my brethren, you've done it to me. So our really only way to show benevolent love towards God, I mean, because we can't really offer him anything, and he's not physically here anymore, but we can offer it to those we see in need, who we can regard as the Lord's, and we can offer them benevolent love and not fear, like, again, what's he going to do with the money? That's a fear, I don't know if that's a fear that's, I should, not consider, just like they turn again and rip you. Like when someone asked me for money for food, right? I gave him food because I didn't know if I believed him, And even that, only honestly, I didn't really have any money on me. It was better to give him food, I guess. But I don't know. It's you want to do good for people, but again, just giving someone stuff isn't always the good thing for them. Some people are, like that I was saying about the Great Society programs, they're supposed to relieve poverty, but all they did was create dependence. And give people incentives to stay in poverty, lest as soon as you start crawling out, you start losing your benefits. True love is gonna benefit someone, but also it's true. If we have true love, I don't know, if we have true love in our hearts and our actions are informed, and by true love I mean we're doing it out of a good sense, but also tempered by more than that, because it's not enough to have good intentions. And good intentions say a lot, but someone who has good intentions without taking responsibility for the consequences of their proposed actions, especially if they don't actually do good, I don't know, they're a liar. Their intentions are false. Something else is going on. Okay, but love casts out fear. Fear has torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. There's some fear we have of loving people, of trusting people. To be able to give to people of our goods and of ourselves. I guess, like I know, because it's like I'm not super great at loving myself, so it's like I can take all this as lessons. It's like I need all kinds of work in this. It's like, there's all kinds of areas of life where I could just, I mean, I've gotten, like I said, you can get rid of a lot of sin and then suddenly find like, oh yeah, it's like, love. It's like, that's a tall order. It's like the love of God is such a broad thing. He loves people that are very difficult to love, And that probably includes me from his perspective, I mean, it's fine. I think I'm easy to love. I'm very easy to love. But God doesn't think I'm easy to love necessarily. I mean, maybe my neighbor doesn't think I'm so easy to love necessarily, right? My wife thinks I'm very easy to love, of course. But maybe not as easy as loving the Lord, okay? Yeah. But if we have perfect love, it is. We can love others the way we say we love God. Oh, you say you love God. Well, wow, you look at the way you love people. You must love, because I see your love towards others. There's also, there was another aspect of the fear in love I had in my head that I was holding on to, but I said all that other stuff. Well, we fear losing. Like we fear, well, like I said, it's like, I think I already said that. Like we fear that if we say this stuff, we have some sort of relationship with someone. I always said, like, here's an interesting thing. I've told my wife this, and we noted it between each other. We have said some of the worst things to each other that we've never said to other people. And you think, and we would marvel as, how can we say this to each other? Because we do love each other, and I love her more than any person in the world. It's because I'm not as afraid of losing her love, because not only do I love her, I know she loves me, and I believe in it. I believe in her. So since I believe in that love, I trust it enough to show of myself some more. And I take advantage of it. And sometimes it's sinful. It's just true. I don't consciously take advantage of it. But what I'm saying is, like, in our trusting of the other, we will say things we wouldn't say to strangers because, we know that would end that relationship with that person permanently. Very often, like if you meet a rude stranger, just like forget it. If you have any interest or just in maintaining here's the funny, people are just so vain. It's like their public persona. And this is true of me. I'm not immune to these things. Like I said, I know when it talks about fear and love, I know all that. Because I have a lot of fear and love. Probably because I have a horrible relationship with my mother. That's probably right down to it, to tell you the truth. How could you ever trust anyone if you can't trust your own mother? How could you ever love anyone if you feel no love for your mother? It's a very difficult challenge, I'll tell you that. Like, don't pity me, don't feel whatever. It's just whatever. Okay, it's just another sin I have difficulty with right in the center of the most important thing in our life. But, it's good to be aware of where our weaknesses are. We love him because he first loved us. Something we talk about a lot. I do. It's important. He loved us first and sent his son. Even more than that. From the foundation of the world. It's not that I was like, look at Jesus. What an idea. I love that. No, he sent him for me to look at and say I love. And he said, blessed are your eyes. Because not all can see. Not all can look at Jesus and see, wow, that's the Son of God. And what that means is everything. They look at it and say, that's silly nonsense. Silly man's religion. If a man say, I love God and hateth his brother, he's a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? We've discussed this verse, and it's a very plain verse. You haven't seen God. You say you love him. But here you have a man made in the image of God, in whom Jesus said, whenever you are doing it to the least of these my brethren, you're doing it to me. Because we have not him always. But we have each other. So I say start with yourself. Get yourself right. At least somewhat right. Get yourself oriented right. When I started off in life, I wasn't right, but I was oriented right. I was pointed at the Lord, dead straight. But I was so far away, you couldn't tell, the closer you get to something, the more you see, oh, wait, my aim is way off. You know what I mean? If you're moving at a distant object from far away, it's not obvious if you're, it's like the especially when you're looking at someone, I guess. I'm going to say that. It seems to me a true thing. It wasn't as obvious, not to me. Now it's more obvious. The closer you go to God, the more you realize you're not like him. But also, the more the corrective kicks in, and you become more like him. Until you almost reach this singularity where you realize how unlike him you are, truly. And then simultaneously you come to be him. Because when you be like him, I should say, because once we really know him and see him as he is, we will be like him. We will see him as he is, as John says. That's when the ultimate comes. Until then, we reach. Yeah, if you love God, love your brother also. All right? I think I said that with the proper attitude. Right? It's like, okay, I love God. Okay, I hear you. Let's see how much you love your brother. Love your brother also. He's right there. And it's not easy. Believe me, it's not easy to love God if you should know him. That's why the Lord lets us start with our brethren, because we start there. Like I said, get your own life in order. Work on your relationship with your significant other, which should be your fiance or wife. It's like that's the significant other, the one who's about to become, or the one who is your spouse, or whatever. Work on. Well, if you have a mind to change things, if you have a mind to serve God, to preach the gospel, we gotta first rule our own house as well. Whatever even as a woman, you rule your house, because you may be under a husband, but everything else is under you. So, don't a woman is over every child, if not her husband, and she doesn't want to be, because every woman desires to be married to a man who she can look up to. And if you didn't marry that way, that's unfortunate. Then you have to compensate. As a believer, we can do all. It's always incumbent on the one who feels he is more together, more in with the Lord. You are the one who has to stoop. You are the one who has to condescend to the man of low degree. If it's he who thinks he sees, on whom the responsibility falls. Judgment begins at the house of God. And and we can only imagine how it's going to go. Well, we can do more than imagine. We've seen the Lord himself enter into the temple with his whip. I like that. I'd love to whip preachers. That would sound fun. I'd definitely like to drive them out with a whip. It's funny, he did that. I vicariously lived through that. I do. I love that image. And who doesn't, right? Isn't that funny? But he came and he did one of those things we all wish we could do, right? It's like all those people that would pollute God's holy places with their profit making and drive them out with a whip. Because there are some places where it just is not, it has no place. Anyways, so we'll continue with chapter 5 next time. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to being back again tomorrow.
For this purpose, the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil.